There aren't really any action items today on today's agenda, but I do want to acknowledge the committee staff, those who have helped us to prepare for today's meeting. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Trustee Aide Pohai Ryan. Pohai, everyone. Yes, please, because we all worked so hard to prepare for this. I'd also like to acknowledge my secretary, Summer Swords. Summer. Mahalo, Summer. You know, as we transition, as we move into 2025 with our leadership and so forth, or the committee chairs, uh, I've learned so much in this short time, the importance of all of us working together to help one another as we transition to the next phases for all of us, especially if we're quite new to this. And I appreciate everyone's support, your love, your patience. I am learning so much in the last 3 weeks about being the new chair of Budget and Finance. And I tell you folks, it's very overwhelming. But with the love and support of our staff, I know that we can move this forward. And I will do my best to be great at what I am tasked to do as chair of Budget and Finance. But also, I'd like to introduce this very special person because I am honored to have him, all of his years of being involved in OHA, his wisdom, and he's well seasoned as a committee chair. And he is now my vice chair of BNF. Please welcome John Wahe'i Jr. the fourth. I know, look at him. All right, at this time though, I would also like to explain to you, being that this is a new committee, I would also like to explain just the background of what the Budget and Finance Committee is all about. And so as they're defined by the Board of Trustees bylaws on page 15, Article 8, standing committees, Section 1, Committee of Budget and Finance. The committee shall, A, handle all fiscal and budgetary matters and ensure proper management, planning, evaluation, and use of OHA's trustee funds. B, develop policies that strengthen OHA's fiscal controls and financial management. C, review, approve, disapprove appropriate grants that supports OHA's overall mission. D, evaluate OHA program to determine their effectiveness to decide whether to continue, modify, or terminate a program. E, in consultation with the chairperson of the Committee on Beneficiary Advocacy and Empowerment, carry out the recruitment and selection of OHA administrator. And finally, F, provide oversight of special councils or commissions as assigned by the board. And so basically, this is obviously a huge task, and I can truly appreciate everyone's support, my fellow trustees, and of course, all of your staff and administration as well. At this time, I'd like to, and as I mentioned earlier, action items, there are none on today's agenda, but I will ask Pohai if there are,
Madam Chair.
any testifiers. Yes. Oh, yeah. And before we do that, I would like Pohai to please do a roll call. We can establish our quorum.
Trustee Ahuna. Are we having any response? Oh, I'm sorry. He is coming late. I was notified.
Mahalo.
Trustee Akaka. She on Can't hear it. Trustee Akina.
Aloha mai kako.
Trustee Galuteria.
Neil.
Chair Kahele. Trustee Lindsay. Trustee Souza.
Eu.
Trustee Wahe'i. Committee Chair Alapa.
Present. 8 affirmative present. Sorry. Yes, mahalo everyone. Thank you so much. Joining the trustees today is Kapuana Stacy Ferreira. Please, Stacy, at this time, would you take the opportunity to introduce your staff?
Mahalo Chair, Vice Chair, Trustees. Joining us today administratively, we have Chief Operating Officer Kehau Pu'u, Chief Financial Officer Ramona Hink. We have our Interim Corporation Counsel Everett Ota, Interim Senior Legal Counsel Nichi Ozawa, Senior Director of Strategy and Implementation Elena Farden, Senior Director of Hawaiian Cultural Affairs Hailama Farden, Director of Education and Culture-Based Learning Ku'ule Anuhea Awo-chan, Director of Economic and Business Resilience Poni Askew, Director of Community Engagement Lisa Von Sekona, Interim Information Technology Manager Kevin Chalk, IT Systems Engineer and Administrator Daniel Santos, and Chair, if I may, take a few minutes to have our new Communications Director introduce himself to the board.
Aloha, Budget and Finance Chair Alapa,
Aloha.
Board Chairperson Kahele, and other committee members, mahalo for having me here this morning. I've been with OHA 2 months and a little more. It's a privilege and an honor to work here at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. As some of you may know, I've spent most of my career here as a journalist, a storyteller, telling the stories of Hawaii's people, Native Hawaiians among them. I've worked in government communications with some challenging issues. But I feel very comfortable here. I feel called here to do the work of OHA. And that is, improving the well-being of Native Hawaiians. When I moved here 30 plus years ago, I fell in love and married a Hawaiian woman. We have 2 beautiful Hapa Hawaiian children. And my wife's father ingrained in me, a haole boy from the mainland, what a special place this is, what special people live here, the special quality of Hawaiians, how they have suffered in their homeland, and how, as a journalist at the time and a storyteller, I need to be mindful of that. And it's a lesson I've taken to heart. And as I say, feel very privileged and honored to be working here. I feel a really good energy here. I think our CEO is putting together a hell of a team. People who care, people who are good at what they do, people who are good teammates, all that which will make for a great organization doing the work that needs to be done as we move forward. So I hope to add some value based on the experience and the relationships I've built over the past couple of decades. I can't believe it's been that long, but it has. And as I say, I just look forward to doing my 3rd month and my 4th month and my 5th month and beyond here at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We truly are looking forward to working with you in the coming months, years. Thank you again.
Chair, I'd like to acknowledge that Trustee Ahuna has arrived.
Aloha. All right. Move on to item number 2, approval of minutes. And of course, since this is a new committee of Budget and Finance for the Board of Trustees, there are no minutes to be approved. And we're going to move on to item number 3, if you have your list in front of you. And it's unfinished business. And of course, once again, since this is the first meeting of our new Budget and Finance Committee, there is no unfinished business yet. Moving on to item number 4. This is for item A. And this is informational briefing on the Ho'akoakoa Lahui Event Sponsorships Grant. It's consolidated and redesigned from the Ahahui Grants and Sponsorships, the Legacy Board of Trustees, Rural Community Based. At this time, I'd like to call upon Kapuhana Ferreira to discuss the new business of the committee.
Mahalo, Chair. I'm going to ask that Kehau Pu'u, COO, join us and provide her overview for the board.
Hi. Aloha Committee Chair, Trustee Alapa, Vice
Aloha.
Chair Waihe'e, Trustees, na limahana, me na kanaka o ke kai'ulu, Keho Pu'u, Chief Operating Officer. So I'm here today to share a redesigned process for event grants and sponsorships called Ho'akuakua Lahui. Back in October, when we last met with the RM committee, we brought sponsorships before the board for approval. There were lots of questions around our process, intake, evaluation, our criteria. Also, questions raised about Ahahui grants, which also provide funding in support of events. So back in October, we did commit to coming back this month with an updated process and so I'm here to share that process, which was already worked on and shared with the board back in March 2024. So I do want to acknowledge the work of former grants manager Keala Newman, the former COO Casey Brown, and our research and evaluation director Carla Hostetter. So they had done pretty much the large lift of revising these grants. So I don't have a PowerPoint to share with you all today, Kalamaya'u, but what was provided in your packet is a summary of Ho'akuakua Lahui. So I will kind of take you through that a little bit. But just a little bit of background. So right now, what currently exists within the Office of Hawaiian Affairs are two different grants and processes that essentially serve the same purpose of supporting events through OHA funding. So in one bucket, we have sponsorships, and within sponsorships, we have legacy sponsorships, which are support events that have been it provides funding to organizations for events that have been supported for OHA for several years. And so these sponsorships are line items within OHA's budget. Second is our BOT sponsorships, which is where a lot of our new sponsorship requests have been funded. And so this is one other separate bucket. Third, within sponsorships is rural community-based sponsorships that has not yet been rolled out this fiscal year. But this sets aside $1,000 for events throughout rural communities. And so that's the first bucket of event funding sponsorships. Second is Ahahui grants. And these are grants that support events also, most of them community-based, free to public. So I'm gonna grab my packet. So we have these two different processes that essentially have similar purpose, and that is to support events that are aligned to OHA's mission, our strategic outcomes and strategic foundations, and also provide some kind of benefit to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, whether it's through marketing, community engagement opportunities, having an information table, or for fundraising events, like having a table. We're essentially purchasing a table to support this nonprofit organization. So I'm gonna try to go briefly through the handout. So the similarities between the two both require that the organizations being funded are nonprofit. Again, they're essentially funding events, and there is a benefit to OHA, but they must also be aligned to our mission and our strategic plan. Where we start to see differences is in the amounts. So on the Ahahui side, the largest grant that was awarded back in 2023, which is when I believe we did our last solicitation, was $10,000. On the sponsorship side, we have a range from 5,000. 15,000 is pretty much our steady sponsorship, award. However, our highest max event that we sponsor is $25,000, and that's for the Merry Monarch Festival. So this is where we start to see differences between the two. Also, another difference is the application process. So there is, yeah, that's the biggest difference is the rigor of the application process. So for AHA Hui grants, it was run similar to our larger dollar community grants, where we put out a solicitation, organizations put in their application, they must meet certain eligibility requirements, their applications are evaluated, and then recommendations are made, which do come before the board. Um, and then there are reporting requirements. So that's on the AHA Hui side. On the sponsorship side, there was an application, there is an application, one that was existing. It was not very as detailed as or rigorous as the AHA Hui grant application. Um, in my short time here, we started to add more to the application, like alignment to the strategic outcomes. But basically, it was an application, a W-9 requirement. But we did also have these applications go through a review and recommendations were made. Um, Prior to our Pohana coming on board, legacy sponsorships, because they were already approved and included in OHA's budget, they didn't typically come before board for approval. But since Stacy has come on, this is something that she's required. There, we have seen some changes in some of the organizations. Their events may or may not be happening anymore. And so requiring this has been beneficial for OHA. We've been able to gather the information that we need in order to bring before all of you any type of recommendation. So with these differing processes that essentially serve common purpose, right, of impacting our lahui through these events, whether it's a free community-based event to a fundraising gala. Um, what the desired outcome here today is to provide a fair and equitable process and opportunity for nonprofits to acquire funding for their events that are strongly aligned to OHA's mission and strategic foundations and outcomes. So we have combined this application process and criteria to capture what was two different processes. And so you do have before you a handout. The background is on the first page, which I just kind of took you folks through. On the second page is, purpose of Ho'akua Lahui, and the Inoa Ho'akua Lahui was given by, again, our former grants manager, Keala Newman. And it means to assemble, to gather, to bring together the Lahui, or our people, which is makes sense, yeah, fitting for this sponsorship grant. So again, purpose is to support nonprofit organizations hosting events that are really in support of Mana'i Mauliola and OHA's mission. Next listed is the qualified events, which really is just the bringing together of all the events that fell under both AHA Hui as well as sponsorships. So it's a mix. It's a mix of very, grassroots, community-based community events to, fundraising events that may happen at different hotels, like Holoku Ball, but all to support organizations that, again, are supporting our lahui in some way or form. So these are events that are qualified under our revised grant process. Just a note down at the bottom. So multi-day events are allowed, but this isn't a sponsorship grant that would continue on throughout the year. It can be multi-day, but it would need to be within a 30-month or 1 month period, 30-day or 1 month period. We do have eligibility requirements. So this is nice in that there is a little bit more rigor from what was required formally on the sponsorship side. So must be nonprofit, need your IRS letter of determination. All organizations would be required to complete the application and, submit a W-9 and Kamea. Right now, the max budget request is 25K, and that takes into account the fact that Mary Monarch has been funded at the amount. That's the only event though that is funded at that higher amount. Pretty much everything else has been 15K. So this is still something I'm thinking about. Yes.
And I just want to add for the board that there are exceptions. So FestPac would be one at the 1.5 million. It was a sponsorship. So the board does reserve the right, if and when an exception needs to be brought in front of the board for a higher amount, more than the 25,000, that is an option.
And I'm almost done. So real quick, so orgs who get this specific sponsorship grant can only receive one in the fiscal year and only one OHA grant per event. So if my nonprofit and Stacy's nonprofit, we're both, putting on the same event together, between the two of us, only one of us can apply and have a OHA grant applied to that event. The page 3 lists our evaluation criteria, which covers, the scope of the event, alignment to our strategic plan, budget. So we are asking for some information regarding budget, which is something we did on one side, not the other side. And then, what are those opportunities for recognition or community engagement? Page 4 is just an overview of our process. Something that we definitely want to do is, one, make this a accessible, visible, transparent process. So right now we don't have anything posted on our website regarding sponsorships. And for Ahahui, that becomes accessible when we put out a formal solicitation, again, similar to our larger community grants. So what we would like to do is put this up on our website, make information and application available year round. So applicants can look at the criteria, submit their required documents and application no sooner than 12 months prior to the event. First thing we're going to do though is determine eligibility. Make sure you have your IRS letter, nonprofit, got your W-9, all of that. After that, then the application would be batched with other applications whose event falls in the same identified time frame. And this is so that if I put mine in 1 year before and Stacy gets hers in 6 months before, I don't have an advantage. We're still gonna put you with this batch to be reviewed at the same time by our sponsorship owners. So we have evaluation by a sponsorship owner, and we'll create a rubric from the criteria that I shared on the other page. And so they'll make a recommendation, yes or no. So if no, we'll send a letter. If yes, then we would batch those applications, and the goal is to come to the board only 4 times a year, like quarterly, with recommendations for event sponsorship approvals. So when we create our action items, there is this, flow of approvals. It would start with COO, our CFO, who will verify that we have the funds available. Everett Ota, Corp Counsel, Stacy, our Pohana, and then our Budget and Finance Committee Chair is the last to sign off and approve to say, yes, I approve of bringing these recommendations before the committee. And the flow pretty much continues. Yes, right on. We're going to send you a letter and give you some info on how to proceed. If no, we'll send you a notification. And then we have some internal processing for check disbursement, and the goal is to disperse at least 2 to 4 weeks prior to the event. Ideally more, but at the very least 2 to 4. And we will have, so something that didn't exist on the sponsorship side, but did exist on the Ahahui side was reporting. So we do want to have the sponsorship owner be responsible for some kind of, end report after the event is public. Last page. So some important column I know is second to the last. Some important information to share. So I shared earlier, we would make the applications available online year round, no more than 12 months, but we're only going to bring it to board quarterly. But that wouldn't start till next fiscal year. In our 2026-2027 biennium budget, I think this is important to share and be forthright about, is what we would like to do is consolidate all the budget categories into one. So this means sponsorships, legacy, rural base, BOT, and then AHA. So that, again, we have one bucket of sponsorship grants, and again, fair and equitable process. A few things, last page, for real. We would like to roll this out ASAP, although I have the end of the month. We do have some sponsorship requests before us for events that are happening in March and at the end of the month. We feel confident with our application and our criteria. So although 127 has been identified as our date, like ideally, I'd like to send applications out next week to those who have reached out already through, trustees and CEO. For the remainder of the fiscal year, we probably will continue to bring sponsorships to the BOT monthly. Monthly, while we work on a timeline for how to bring them quarterly. So at the bottom is just a draft timeline for what it would look like. We still got to work on that if we were to bring sponsorships to you folks quarterly. Do you have anything to add? I think that's all. So yes, I'm definitely open to your questions and also feedback.
Hulu Lindsay.
Thank you. I'm just concerned about the minimum sponsorship or grant, whatever you're calling it. I see 3 figures here in our graph, and it's 5,000, 15,000, and 25,000. So what is the minimum? 5,000?
So right now there isn't a minimum, but 5,000 would be, so we don't have a minimum
Okay,
at this time. No minimum amount required.
I'm concerned about that because there are many, many small groups of nonprofits that ask us for just $1,000 or $1,500 for, let's say, a Halloween party for the kids of the community. I mean, can be any which way, and I see them competing against the big guys, and they may not get their fair shake. So I'm concerned about that, and if you can consider as you write your rules and regs, how that's going to affect the La Hui, because we have been getting a lot of small requests. They want to do a function at the park this Sunday, and that kind of thing, and it's in alignment with our strategies. So I think we should consider always the small guys because the big guys know how to do it. Yeah. So and most of the big people, we already have them down for legacy. So I just wanted to share that.
Anyone else? Trustee Ahuna?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. My question and concerns come from, like last year, Molokai, they were saying they get zero. Are these grants statewide or is it non-competitive? We're going to isolate to individual islands or anything like that?
That's a great question.
Thank you. You don't need to answer them now.
Okay. But just to note, the Molokai, so that was separate. Those were our larger community grants, like our 6-figure grants that we were awarding. And so that's a separate, I guess, grant from this one. So these are events.
Um, sorry. Souza.
Mahalo, Chair. Hey, Keho, you mentioned earlier about, I guess, putting all the grants budget together, whether it's a BOT sponsorship or OHA grant. I would agree with that actually, because if it's easier to realign, rather, taking it from another grants category rather than somewhere else, say that we don't use up all the funds in a particular category. So I just wanted to make a comment. Mahalo. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh,
Madam Chair.
Chair Kylie.
I have a question on I guess the non-sponsorship grants. So these would be the other grants
Microphone.
that we,
Like our larger community grants
yeah.
that are aligned to our strategic outcomes.
yeah, is
Yeah.
that part of, our overall
It's separate.
completely separate?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's actually where, we want to start to transition to work more closely with SNI so that those grants are more aligned and specific to our tactics and helping us achieve those tactics. But that's a separate bucket of grant funds.
I guess I'll just, I know it's not part of this conversation, but given the timing of the legislature, I'm not sure if the board has done this in the past, but one of my, thoughts would be, or comments would be, we have our strategic outcomes that we try to appropriately allocate grant funding towards to meet those outcomes. I would, if we're not doing it already, we may suggest doing it, where we are working together within our 9-member trustee team and throughout the different islands, working with individual legislators on their grant and aid applications that they're receiving from their districts and constituents, that they will then decide on what to prioritize to the GIA chairs in each respective committees. And is there a way for us to partner with them on a particular grant so that when they're presenting it to the respective money chairs for approval, that there's also a potential match or a potential additional funding piece with OHA. And in addition to working with the individual, county governments or whatnot. For example, Kehokaha Gymnasium in Hilo, which OHA in the past had played a significant role in developing what was the old Kawana no Kua Hall to a beautiful gym under, previous chair Bobby Lindsay and this board. That gymnasium is in severe disrepair in the heart of Kehokaha. And if you went there on any given day, you would be surprised to see how much that facility is being used in volleyball and football and the different types of sports. But it's in desperate need of repair. Run by the County of Hawaii. It sits on trust lands, Hawaiian homelands, and there's no mechanism to allocate funds to repair it. So if the particular county council member for that district or the state senator or representative for that district was entertaining a grant and aid request to repair that facility, maybe there's a way that OHA can be a part of that as well when we're looking at allocating our grants towards achieving strategic outcomes. So we're partnering with other stakeholders and partners throughout the other respective, county and state governments so we can maximize our resources. I don't know if that level of coordination is happening.
Yeah, mahalo, Chair. It's not. And I can see the benefit of doing something like that, especially for projects or CIP that are costly and you need to really kind of stack, the different resources to be able to meet the goals. I know for the GIA grant, you do need to put in, if you're getting funding from others. I'm not sure about the council process. I just want to make sure that if folks are adding into their application, so like the GIA, that they get less from the state. And then we also want to think about timing, because I know GIAs won't happen until May. And I guess I would ask you how to think about what the timing of our grant solicitation and awarding is with what Chair is asking for, ensuring that we're in alignment with the county and state.
I guess just reflecting back on our dear friend, Senator Dela Cruz, who will always ask the question, Are you talking to the other agencies? Are you working together? You know, you're asking for X amount of money for this particular CIP or GIA. Have you talked to DHHL? Have you talked to OHA? How can you help partner resources so we can maximize the impact in our communities? And this is one way for OHA to do it. The timing of the fiscal budgets, our budget cycle, the state's budget cycle, the county budget cycle is definitely, we maybe need to realign how our grants process works. But this is the time to do it during the legislative session. And it also allows us to collaborate with our colleagues at the legislature and what are their priorities and what are our priorities and how can we, you know, bring synergy to that. So,
Absolutely.
this is a suggestion.
Madam Chair,
Trustee,
Madam Chair, I wanted to add to what Trustee Kahele is talking about regarding the legislature. So in our meetings that we've had with the legislators, part of the discussion is ensuring what programs and sponsorships and grants that we provide, and also ensuring that providing the opportunity for them to share in their newsletters, however they distribute it via mail or via email or social media, that we have these programs available and such so that they can share with their constituents and that it shows that partnership there. But I do think it is a good opportunity where we can partner however we can for our shared communities. And going back also to what you were saying about the Ways and Means Chair, Donovan Dela Cruz's manao, in terms of talking about, we do all these good things, but what do we have to share for it in terms of data-driven results? And that's something where I have asked, and I do continue to encourage that we make our website, our OHA website, more user-friendly for Kekitukupuna. And also that as soon as you come onto the website, you're able to access, whether it's a pop-up or easily navigatable set of navigational tools on our website, where you can see the data of what we are doing. We're doing all these good things, but what do we have to show for it? We need to be able to share those feel-good stories of those that have received the kokua from us, so that people don't have so much room to have to wonder, what does OHA do? Because there's a lot of good things that we do, but they need to have the opportunity to know what those things are. The other thing too is, I have a question regarding clarification on the opportunity for OHA public recognition. So this would be a question for administration. Is there a process in which there's the requirement for these various recipients of to have a posting, whether it's on their website or social media, to share that they are recipients of our kokua? And is there also a process of follow-up to know that they are doing that so that we can repost it? And a process where they are gonna, when they report to the board, that they are going to share all of what they're doing, to let it be known from the very beginning of the process, when they have applicants or they have those that are asking for help through the funding that we're providing, that they're able to have our logo from the paperwork that the people are signing, and that there is no question that this funding is coming from the Office of Foreign Affairs to the very ending. Is there a process for that? I know that
So-
we've talked about this in previous conversations.
So it's, so if you look at the rating criteria, it is gonna be part of that rating criteria. It's also included in the application, but it is not called out as a requirement. We can, but this is why the feedback is good, to make some revisions or changes. So, and that has been part of the consideration in sponsorships right now, is if there is an opportunity again to have our logo placed, or opportunity for to host a community table at the event, et cetera, et cetera. As far as follow-up, it has been the organizations that will reach out to us to ask for our logo, or sometimes they offer more than, like they'll offer a whole page in their event materials. Right now, as we've updated the process, when we send a letter saying, congratulations, you've been approved, we also are including in that the logo and our OHA logo and saying, here's our logo for you to include in all of your materials.
I want to make sure I'm hearing this correct. So you are saying that there is, for instance, a folder of set of assets that's provided, which includes the OHA logo, so that they don't even have to ask for it. It's already handed to them.
No, that's not current process, but that's a change in the process that we're making. Current process has been, I'll be honest, I mean, they come out, they ask, and then comms will forward our logo or anything else that they asked for. So that's a process change that we're making, is once approved and we send our letter, we'll also include that logo.
Trustee, we can also make it a condition of award that they have to provide us with some kind of proof or verification of, whatever kind of promotion that they've done that includes our logo before a check is sent. If we want to be as strict as that, we can certainly condition awards.
I mean, I know that we had talked about this last year when we were meeting about the same process in terms of how can we better the PR between the agencies, those that are receiving this money, so that we don't get lost along the way, because time after time, people don't know where this funding is coming from. They just think that it's coming directly from that organization when it is truly coming from the Office of Wine Affairs.
I'm gonna say in my 6 months here, though, with the sponsorships that the board has approved, I have seen materials coming through, requests for logos. Recently, I mean, a commercial that called out OHA, two commercials that called out our sponsorship. And one thing that I do want to also just mention is that the level of advertisement may be different, right? Depending on the kind of organization and the kind of community event that they're putting on. So those that may be more, again, as I say, grassroots, community-based, they may not have those same kind of opportunities to, flash OHA's name as maybe others that have a more formal event. So, but in the 6 months I've been here, I have seen that. Where I do see, and not to say that there isn't room for improvement, another area of improvement, though, I think is just with our community grants and the larger organizations that we support. And I'm talking like our $200,000, $500,000 grants. I think that there is definitely a need to follow up and again, make our support more visible, or make that a requirement or condition as we award our larger grants. So yeah, just sharing.
Trustee Aquina?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kehao, for the report. I have a question for Kapuhana, and it dovetails on the comments made by Chair Kahele and Trustee Akaka. This week on Monday, it was wonderful to see Chair Kahele and Kapuhana in front of two committees of the state legislature, the Senate Ways and Means Committee and the House Finance Committee. You both did an outstanding job. One thing in particular that struck me was the excellent explanation that Kapuhana gave to a fundamental shift at OHA in the way that we relate our strategic plan, Mani Mauli Ola, to the grants program. And as you described, if I have it correctly, in the past, applicants would choose from a menu of OHA goals and strategies to justify their applications, but this was more of a passive approach in terms of OHA being able to actually accomplish bottom line outcomes. And in response to Senator Dela Cruz's question, you responded in a way that showed how we can actually identify outcomes, such as thousands of housing units will be built, or hundreds of Hawaiians will be able to afford mortgages, or, uh, for example, a couple hundred high school dropouts could complete a GED and get an internship. And with these kinds of strategic outcomes, we would have metrics and measure them. And you explained how now the philosophy is that we use the grants program to empower these strategic outcomes. And what I wanted to ask is, how prepared are we to begin doing that now? And what steps do we have to take in order for that to come about? Kehal mentioned that we're ready to go almost on the next rollout of grant opportunities, but I imagine it'll take some time. It'll take some work on our part as a board to identify those outcomes and the bottom line results, and then to tie them into the grants program and to incentivize and to find programs that will actually accomplish these outcomes.
Correct. So there's multiple answers to that question, and some of it is strategic and some of it is operational. One of the things that we had to do with the last grant cycle was to ensure that we were going to do multi-year awarding. So trustees approved awards that would be able to be executed over a up to 3-year period. That allows us the runway, the operational runway, to make the pivot from grants that were just general postings, like an RFP, to being more precision, like about these are the specific solutions that we're trying to address, and then putting out a call for what organizations, entities can help us achieve X strategy. So the grant side has already started to shift because of the decision made by the board to allow that 2 to 3 year runway, so that we're not going to be doing another solicitation. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is the strategy and implementation team is currently just as they put together their tactics for the Ways and Means and Finance Committee. So we were prepared, if asked, to talk about programmatic or service type strategies that we were going to employ, and the actual performance metrics. We could have shared it at those meetings based off of the monies that we were asking in that general fund request. We had that level of detail. What the team is currently working on is the much larger OHA budget. So again, the general fund ask is only 7% of our total budget spend. So there's a much larger piece of the pie, the budget pie, that the strategy and implementation team are putting tactics together that will have budget alignment, right? That will detail how much resources they will need to be able to execute on any particular tactic. All of those tactics will be by their Mana I Mauliola strategic outcome, and there's going to be lots that we're going to, have to address, because there's a lot of need out there in terms of bettering the conditions of Native Hawaiians. I will add to that some of the tactics that are going to come before this board with the budget request is not only going to focus on the bettering the conditions of Native Hawaiians, but it's also going to be focusing on systems change and infrastructure that's going to be required as we pursue and nationhood. Because for us to facilitate Chapter 10H, Native Hawaiian recognition, we want to make sure that the systems are in place and infrastructure is being put together so that when the lights come on for us to accomplish 10H, that we're not starting at square one. So there's two different strategies that are needing to be employed through our budget request and this pivot from this overarching grant call out to very specific tactics. And the team is working on that now, and they will be ready to take out to community to get feedback. It will also come before the board for discussion and approval through committees, and then through the final board vote. It is a huge shift, but I think for the first time in OHA's history, we will have very direct alignment between our statutory requirement, our strategic vision that has been set forth by this board, and the expectations of the outcomes of Mana'i Mauliola will be aligned to the resource ask, as well as the tactic that we believe is actually going to start moving the meter.
Well, I thank you, and I appreciate your use of the phrase "huge shift."
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we fully appreciate the extent of a shift that this is going to be. And this is perhaps the first time I've heard at the table here so clearly articulated some of this. For example, it is a big shift to move from being an organization that benignly
Correct.
passes out funding to support worthy causes to one that is saying, this is what we need to accomplish for the Hawaiian
Absolutely.
people. And if you're in line with that, we will fund you to do that. That's going to require a lot of communication because there may be some well-meaning applicants who believe that because it's a worthy project they bring forth and they're qualified to execute it, and it's Hawaiian, that it should be funded.
Sure.
But we're sending a different message altogether. And the second item, and I'll close with this, I really appreciate hearing the very aggressive approach to creating infrastructure in order for our Mana'i Mauliola objectives to get achieved.
Yes.
So, for example, what I'm hearing is that in population centers of Native Hawaiians like Nanakuli or the entire West Coast, Baianai, we're not just looking for Native Hawaiian projects to fund. We're also, if we're going to talk about education or talk about housing, we're also going to be aggressive about seeing that that geographic place has the infrastructure, has the, if you will, the roads, the buildings, the electricity, everything needed. And those are big projects that are going to require collaboration with
Absolutely.
the public and private sector throughout the state. That's a big role for OHA to play. And so I commend you in articulating this. And I encourage the attention we need to communicating it. It is, as you say, a huge shift.
Agreed. Thank you for your support. You know, it is going to take collaboration, coordination to create the coherence that we want to see. But essentially, none of that happens without leadership. And OHA is poised because we have the statutory mandate to be that leader. We've just not exercised that. And so I'm looking forward to, you know, one of the things that we talked about at the budget briefings was that, you know, we have the statutory authority to ensure that the state agencies are living up to their trust responsibility and obligations to Native Hawaiians through the programs and services in place. That is $20 billion that we have not leveraged. And the strategy and implementation team will be doing that. And so some of the tactics that they will be putting together when we have an opportunity to better understand what the different executive branch departments and agencies are doing, that they will turn into tactics so that we can be very focused on how do we start pivoting, even not just our own way of doing and getting and trying to get results, but also how the state agencies, over 20 of them, how they're operating and how they're achieving the results that they should be getting in bettering conditions of Native Hawaiians. And when we talk about infrastructure, it is working with DOT, you know, it's working with DOE. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can be doing, but yet we need the opportunity to get in there, really understand what's happening or not happening. And that's that same look that we have to do within our own agency. And so we're making those pivots. And I do want to say too that strategy and implementation is new, obviously, for the agency, but it doesn't discount all of the other PAIA who are going to have to work very, very synergistically with the strategy and implementation team, because every tactic that's created has an action plan. And every action plan requires, there's interdependencies, whether it's with communications or advocacy or one of the other, or multiple departments within OHA, but also externally. So that's when we're going to start identifying how this tactic is going to come to fruition. Who in the county should we be working with? Who at the state or federal level should we be working with? Who in the private sector? So there's going to be lots of different stakeholders and potential collaborators that need to be identified because we cannot do this lift alone. And it's a long haul. And I'm going to ask for the grace of the board in advance because the shift does not happen overnight. And part of strategic implementation is you need to kind of go down the road. And then if it's not working, we assess and we may need to pivot then as well. But we need to have the courage to just go and do and see what results we get because what we're currently doing is not working. And we need to be okay with that and say that we're going to do something different. And I think what we've proposed to the legislature, what we have already got the approval of the board in terms of just having the strategy implementation team sends a signal that this is a new day for OHA. We are serious about our mandates and we're serious about accomplishing Mana'i Mauliola. So I appreciate your support and your questions.
Mahalo.
Mahalo nui, CEO, for I would like to acknowledge our trustee Souza.
Hello, Madam Chair. It's not a question, but just a request. If we could have the applicants potentially show up, or at least request for them to show up, the ones being recommended anyway. Sometimes the trustees have questions, even though the process is vetted already by you guys. And then sometimes we'd like to know more and understand more about the entity or organization. So if we could put that down. Thank you. Hello, Madam Chair.
Mahalo. Chair would like to recognize trustee Wahehe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sylvia, Stacy, Stacy, I'm going to talk about, it's going to sound like I'm talking about the grants, but it all applies to the sponsorships also. In the last grants that we approved, we ended up accessing the unspent funds from the previous year to fund the things we wanted to. But we had to take a special, almost like a realignment kind of action to access them. Is it possible that we could, at least in the second year of a biennium budget that we've already approved, to just have the leftover money transferred automatically in the grants and the sponsorships so that we can just access them the following year without having to go through that kind of action? And if that's possible, would that be a board policy that would need to be done, or could admin?
Yeah, it's
do
a,
that?
okay, I'm gonna ask Mona to come up. Because I don't want to misspeak, but my understanding is because I only have a certain threshold authority, 5% or $100,000. So
Trustee Waihe, I think it's proper just to go through when we do the action item for a grant to access the grant carryover. So right now we have a certain amount of grant carryover. I think it's like 8 million from previous years, from fiscal 22, 23, 24 to 25. So we have access to 8 million, and it can be like every grant has to have board approval anyway. And
Right.
so we can access the carryover.
But I mean, I guess like for the people that are reviewing the grants and approving them, they're not going to be comfortable to use it unless the board gives them permission first, right? So if it automatically transferred, at least within the same biennium, then they would have more money that they could give out. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Well, the grant department and Kehao and I, we work closely together regarding funding and making sure that all the grants or the applicants that are eligible, get the funding that they need.
Okay.
And it can be presented to the BOT at that point.
I guess what so for the last round,
Mhm.
we initially couldn't give out, we initially didn't give out we didn't give out all the grants that we wanted to. And we had to come back later and get a special, take a special action to access the unspent money from the previous year. If it had just been there in the first place, I'm saying we could have just approved them all in the first try.
I'm gonna, I assume it's gonna be a policy change. To be able to just automatic, because right now it requires a realignment. So what trustee is asking is, if we do a policy change, it would just roll over at a certain point in the fiscal year, correct? So while Everett's looking that up, I also just want to make a comment that as we pivot, right? And we're no longer going to be looking at sort of this scatter shot of, here are the grant categories and we just try to max it out. What we're hoping to do is based on the tactics and the budget that comes before this board is actually going to be based off of what they believe it's going to cost for us to have that tactic be put forth. And that's going to come from that grant category. Because I just want to make sure that we're all clear that when we start, when you folks appropriate that money for the tactics, it could be a grant, it could be a contract, it could be like a sole source contract or a services for a fee. So there's different mechanisms that we want to be able to use that category, grant category for, to be able to pay for those various tactics. So they're not all going to be used for community grants. A large part of that is going to be pivoting towards paying for the tactics to be executed.
Trustee Lindsay.
I just wanted to add to that. I think it would be helpful for the trustees in the process of approvals of the grants to receive a list. And I say this because I experienced watching Hawaiian Homes do it. They have an excellent grant officer. And what they do is they report every single applicant, why they were turned down, so that there's so clear transparency in our giving of our money. Because, people make comments about us giving friends or whatever, and we know we don't do that. But I think with documentation like that, that would clear the air with a lot of people and ourselves.
Mahalo, trustee. What we will do is we will reach out to Hawaiian Homes and we'll ask them for their process and the template that they use, and we can consider that. Okay.
Trustee Sousa.
Hello, Madam Chair. If I'm understanding Trustee Wahi's question correctly, um, when we approve the budget for the next fiscal year, right? We understand that there's carryovers and realignments. So we should see those numbers ahead of time regardless, right? I mean, just to clear up that whole thing.
Yes.
We'll see it before we start approving grants,
Yes,
right?
it'll be part of the fiscal 26 and 27
Right.
presentation.
So, yeah, we'll have those numbers.
Yes.
It's just if that answers your question. Thank you.
Trustee Ahuna.
Ooh, this is a tough one for me, sorry. I know you cited 10H about the self-determination, but for me, because what he's saying is, I think it's like private self-determination. So I don't know if it's a governmental organization that, that can reclassify all of that. I think he's actually right. So I just wanted to make sure, maybe we can look into this because, maybe we should just talk about this later. But, I don't know if we want to do that. That's why. Reclassify. I think we should be doing what he's saying because, I mean,
He's asking that it just roll over automatically at a certain point.
so we can read,
I just want to add though that we want to use our current budget, right? And then go to the carryover later, once we use up our current budget. We don't want to use the carryover first without, using our current budget.
I just want to take a moment before Everett comes on because, and I don't want it to go down a rabbit hole, but I think we should all baseline our understanding on what a carryover is, right? So every fiscal year, you folks approve a budget. For whatever reason during that fiscal year, we may not spend all the funds. Sometimes it's because we have vacancy savings. Sometimes we're not able to execute a contract on time. So there's always going to be somewhat of a difference, right? Left in the account, right? And this is no different than the state. The state has a carryover too. And that's because, again, there's just no way that we're going to be so precision like that. We're going to spend everything that we budget. There's always going to be a positive variance. It's that positive variance that we're calling a carryover. So in 2022, that was the very first time that the trustees approved the opportunity for us to keep a carryover. So 2022 had a carryover number, 4 or 5 million. And then 23 had a carryover because again, we didn't spend everything that fiscal year. That money just remains, right? But it aggregates, right? So each year it just aggregates every time we don't spend everything each fiscal year. So to Trustee Waihe's comment earlier, we did dip into the carryover from the previous fiscal year 24 for the 25. Yeah, well, it's cumulative, yes. So we did dip into that carryover in 2025 so that we could award more grants. We still have a carryover balance because again, it's an accumulation of 4 years, right? And a carryover is very important for us to ensure that if ever we have repair maintenance costs that are unexpected, if there are pivots in programs and services that we want to do, if there's CIP, right? If there's, a purchase that, we want to make in real estate, that we actually have this cushion, if you will. And that money, again, just carries over year. I want to just make a point that our current carryover is 11% of our total budget. The state of Hawaii, if we compare it to, somebody else who has that same exact practice, the state of Hawaii is at 12%. So we are in the ballpark. We're not majorly low and we're not excessively high. We're right in that ballpark. The thing that's different between OHA and our carryover is that if there are emergency costs that need to be addressed, we would have to take it from that carryover. Unlike the state, that they have not only their carryover, it's about $1 billion this year. They also have a $1.5 billion rainy day fund. And that rainy day fund is really to address emergency type situations like COVID, right? So I just wanted to make sure that we all baseline on what is a carryover, the importance of that carryover, how we use carryover, and that we are no different than how the executive branch uses the carryover and that percentage that we're operating in. Mahalo.
Mahalo for that.
Madam Chair, no, I wasn't, that's why I never once used the word carryover, because I wasn't referring to that general carryover. I was talking about the leftover funds specifically in the category of grants, that if we don't spend them all in the first fiscal year, that it would transfer to be, so we could use it, in the same category now. So it's not reassigned, or we're not taking it from other leftover carryovers. Oh,
We keep the grant carryover separate from the other carryover, from the budget carryovers, from the other programs. We keep it specifically separate.
Yeah, so we wouldn't, so are you asking, so yours is just, again, the mechanics of it just rolling over from one year to the other. Very simple, very straightforward, stays in the same expenditure category. Yeah, and that's a policy change, right?
Yes, hello again, trustees, Chair Alapa, if I could. So the budget carryover provision in our executive policy manual is under 3.4.5G. And that allows for this multi-year carryover provision, carryover of funds from one fiscal year to the next. And it's currently subject to board action upon presentment to the board, and then approval in consideration of like spending policy, cash withdrawals, and the like. So there is currently a requirement that these carryover uses be brought back before the board for action, which, again, is part of our policies. We can change that, and it's certainly up to this board to make those types of policy decisions. I would maybe perhaps say that, we are continuing to operate under the current, requirement that it be brought before the board, and that might also provide this board and maybe even the public beneficiaries with assurances that the use of these carryover funds is not something, that could be characterized as some kind of, more open-ended, like slush fund type use, because all of those approvals are coming back before this body or, the committee and then the board for approval. So again, we can adjust based on the board's policy decisions, but that might be a consideration, for making those funds available, but it might just create other issues or questions, and that we would also be prepared to answer.
Trustee Ahuna. D'Souza.
I like the fact that we're talking about carryovers. That's always a good thing. But I don't really like to talk about carryovers in the grant category, only because I want to get the monies out. So as long as we can focus on that as well, And so just want to emphasize that. Mahalo.
And just to continue to layer onto what you just said, we're using the word grant as an overarching expenditure category. But again, grant could be a contract, could also be a fee for service. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're all understanding that it's not always going to be your typical competitive grant. So the community grants are competitive community grants. But then in that grant category, there may also be a contract, it might be a fee for service, and it could be an RFP, and all of those go through the procurement process. Mahalo.
Any further questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
one other
Trustee
thing I wanted to share in our work with the legislators last year is that when we had meetings with the various legislators, one of the things we provided to them so that they know what is going on within OHA and in their community is an OHA community report and also a summary specifically assembled for their particular district for their constituents. And what we shared, part of that was the grantees that were served by the Office of Foreign Affairs, the names of the various entities, as well as the amount, so that they were able to see the deliverables that we had. And I think that that's something, a practice that we should continue with our meetings that we have with various branches of government, so that they can see how active and activated we are within our Hawaiian communities and beyond, and how that impacts not just our Hawaiian people, but also the Hawaii community as a whole. Mahalo.
Mahalo. All right, at this time, as we come towards the end of our meeting, I'm going to ask if there are any testifiers.
Chair, there are no testifiers online, but I believe there's testifiers present. If you could identify yourself if you would like to testify, please.
Aloha, Chair.
Aloha. Really, really quick, I'd like to make a comment as I've been advised. Public testimony should be limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda and will occur prior to any listed items conclusion or vote. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes. If you begin to address other issues not on today's agenda, the BFA chair will call you out of order and direct you to limit your testimony to items listed on the agenda. Testifiers' mics will be unmuted when it is your turn to testify, but at this time, we do have our first in-person beneficiary that would like to testify, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Chair, point of clarification. You said that I have 5 minutes, but I can't see a timer.
Kevin, the computer timed out.
And it doesn't have a timer. Yeah. But there's actually a delay, you know. Or is it? Oh. Chair. Oh. Is it okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
It works, yes.
Aloha Chair and trustees. My name is Jermaine Myers. I am an OHA beneficiary for beneficiary advocacy and empowerment. I am also a Nanakuli Hawaiian Homestead lessee. Mahalo for the presentation that shows us that there will be equitable grants when it comes to events. I was one of those that were concerned about sponsorship, most especially legacy sponsorship, because I do feel that there are some organizations in my community that have been doing annual events that would warrant them to have legacy sponsorship. So fundraising was not allowed in Ahahui grants before. So I think it's really important that when you roll out the new system, that you highlight the fact that fundraising would also be allowed for events, and that you highlight the criteria, because it's going to be something new for many of the nonprofits, the fact that you can now do fundraising. And regarding the legacy sponsorship for my community, in 2024, we celebrated the 3rd annual Christmas on the Avenue by one of our association nonprofits. And then we also, in 2024, celebrated the 5th annual of Prince Kuhil Day. For these particular events, they had 10,000 participants for each of those events. And each of them had provided economic opportunities, so it would align with the strategic plan for economic opportunities. They provided that for the communities especially the small groups that want to fundraise for their league, etc. I think it's important that in your new process that you also ask that each of the fundraising organizers or each of the event organizers that they provide OHA with photos and videos of their event. Everybody got a cell phone, so I don't believe that there's any excuse why you cannot provide photos and videos of your event to prove the levity and the impact that you had on the community as far as the event, that it aligns with your application. Particularly the two events that I would just mention, the legacy events that I would like OHA to consider for Donna Cooley. They had done a drone video and they presented it to DHHL so that DHHL can understand what is the impact that happened in a community for Christmas on the Avenue. In addition, how are they getting our legislatures involved? Our community, whenever we did these events, we got the mayor involved, we got HPD involved, we got different organizations involved. We had our senators there, we had our representatives there. It's really important. We even had the Lieutenant Governor, Sylvia Luke, there. And so I think it's very important that the application should show that if they are going to have their legislators involved, and we want them to show that OHA was involved in sponsoring it so that the legislatures can see, oh, when I attend this event, this was an event that was sponsored by OHA. So OHA is doing what they say to us at the legislature. They're getting down at the grassroots level, at the homestead level, where Native Hawaiians and Hawaiians call home. You know, many of our events have to be held at cultural centers. My family has had to go there to rent. Okinawan Culture Center in Waipio, my family has had weddings and anniversaries. Japanese Cultural Center in Mo'ilili, we've gone there as well. And Filipino Community Center in Waipahu. And so I really feel that Senator Kim, I disagree that we shouldn't have it at the Royal Hawaiian Culture Center. I agree with Senator DeCourt, my senator for District 22, that we should consider doing a cultural center in our district. And if we have to do it in Kapolei, then that's fine as well, because it's, you know, it's our urban for our country. But if we can have it outside in the Waianae Coast and we don't have to travel so far, right now we have to compete for our events, to have facilities for our events. We either have to rent at some place that is illegal, like where there was the killing of those 4 individuals in Waianae Valley, or we have to compete with the public for the parks. Then we have to rent, you know, tents, etc. We have to get a police escort, etc. So I really feel that a cultural center out on the west side, either in Maili, so that it's centrally located on the west coast, or in Kapolei, which we are considering West Oahu as our urban core for the west side. I really feel that OHA should consider that. Post a notice in the West Side Stories. I see my time is up. My last thing is to ask you to post in the West Side Stories. Many don't read necessarily Kawai Ola because maybe they haven't signed up for it, but everybody gets it on the West Side, and even we all get midweek. So these are our key things along the coastline, and I hope that you would consider them. Kia kuapu, God bless all of you.
Mahalo, Jermaine. Thank you so much for that. Right at this time, I'd like to a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Ahuna? Trustee Akaka?
Aye.
Trustee Akaka?
Aye.
Trustee Akina?
Aye.
Trustee Galuteria? Oh, it should be noted that he did leave the meeting at 12 noon. Trustee Lindsay? Trustee Souza? Trustee Wahe? And Committee Chair Alapa? and Chair Kahele.
During Mahal. Oh my gosh.